Welcome to Transport for the North's discussion of the Northern Powerhouse Rail. I'm David Collins. I'm the Northern Correspondent for the Sunday Times. It's a position I've been doing for the last 3 years. I'm based in Manchester. I cover the whole of the North, news, policy, features, whatever comes up. And Northern Powerhouse Rail is something I've reported on for the last few years. You're going to be hearing from a brilliant panel of people, experts in the field, in their different fields. I'll start by saying that Northern Powerhouse Rail, what is it? Well, it's a programme to deliver a transformational rail network for the north of England. It will be the region's single biggest investment in transport since the Industrial Revolution, and it will feature a mix of new and significantly improved rail lines that will vastly improve regional, national and international connectivity for passengers and freight. They're the words of Transport for the North. They're not my words, but they are words that I believe in. And we're going to be discussing today how Northern Powerhouse Rail will improve connectivity for passengers and businesses, why Northern Powerhouse Rail is a fundamental part of levelling up the North for our 17 million people who live here, and looking at the way that NPR and HS2 are potentially going to be integrated and what the government's plans are for that. So I think each of our panellists are going to introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about NPR. And first, we're going to go over to the Mayor of the Liverpool City Region, Steve Rotheram, who I've discussed NPR with several times. I know he feels very passionate about it. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, David. And an appropriate place to come, given that we're also being handed a particular trophy tonight, but I won't go into too much detail on that. Look, it's an important and particularly important, I suppose, juncture at the moment, because whilst COVID hasn't gone away and it's going to be with us for some time yet, we've got to look to the future, haven't we? And there are a number of issues that need some of our attention. Climate emergency is still hugely important to us. And then we've got the vexed issue of Brexit. But we've also got to start at some stage planning for what the transport needs of the future will be. And that includes Northern Powerhouse Rail, to ensure that we do get the government to do what you've just introduced, David, and to give us a west-east connectivity of rail that the 17 million people in our area deserve. And also it connects up the great northern cities, and that is still a promise that the government needs to deliver on. It's a pledge, I think, that was made way back in, it was in the Tory manifesto, the end of last year. So it's in black and white, it's on page 29, and it says about connecting up coast to coast across the north, and that's still what we need. And the Prime Minister recommitted to the project again in February this year, confirming that when HS2 will be built in full, he said that NPR would also be built too. So I know we haven't got an awful lot of time, but just to explain the background to this, which is that politically we live in the most centralised democracy in the OECD, and we still got the most geographically unbalanced economy in the whole of Europe. And that's, from my perspective, because we have a Whitehall and Westminster model of governance that for far too long has looked south, sometimes at the detriment of the north. And we can't allow this to happen again for our areas, because too often we have lower outcomes than in comparison with the south, be it in health, education, skills, housing, and of course transport too. And so we need to address the disengagement with the centre, and we need an urgent rebalancing of the economy from south to north. And so there's no better opportunity to me than this. In my area alone, NPR would increase our GVA by an estimated £15 billion, improve our visitor numbers by 6.3 million, and it would result in about 24,000 more jobs. But in order to get the benefits of NPR, to be ambitious and focused about transformational schemes, we need people like Northern Powerhouse to be supporting us and looking for the best option, not a suboptimal, cheaper option, which is sometimes where governments are trying to steer us to. So just very quickly, that means the best performing option for our area is an underground station that's central in Warrington, and then for us to get a new station in Liverpool, probably in the city centre, of course, that connects us then through Warrington to Manchester and Leeds and onwards. And we believe that by spending that, I think it's about £40 billion on NPR, you'll get a bigger bang for your buck than you will with HS2. And we're certainly going to be pushing forward with our plans, because that's the only way that the government are going to level up the agenda. And we've heard a lot about Northern Acceleration. We're going to hear a little bit more tomorrow about that. My main message is that we need to speed up the delivery of these massive infrastructure schemes. And I'll leave it at that, David, and answer any questions that people will have later.
Great, thanks, Steve. I think there's some really good points there, which we can go back to. But I think one thing I'm interested in definitely exploring is points you make on, there's different versions of NPR that we could get, isn't there? There's the top bang for your buck, which will cost more. There's the cheaper version. And our government going to be tempted to go down the cheaper route and cut corners because of, the crisis we find ourselves now in with COVID and the increasing debt of the nation. So we're going to go over now to Tim Wood, who is the Director for Northern Powerhouse Rail at Transport for the North. Tim.
Thank you for the introduction, David, and to fellow panellists for joining the discussion on Northern Powerhouse Rail today. The last few months have been unprecedented, but what has become apparent is the investment in Northern Rail network is an essential part of the government's levelling up agenda. Recent announcements are welcome news, but the North, through Transport for the North, has to play a central role in deciding these schemes. Transport for the North is made up of the North's political and business leaders. They understand local passenger needs and want the ability to take decisions and make decisions that respond to those local needs. Decades of underinvestment has resulted in substandard transport infrastructure throughout the north of England. Capacity and reliability issues across the network, coupled with poor connectivity and really slow journey times, has consigned the North to a straitjacket, and that has limited our economic growth. Northern Powerhouse Rail, delivered in full, is part of that solution to transform the North's rail network and unlock the region's untapped economic potential. Through a mixture of new and upgraded railway lines, NPR will radically improve capacity and journey times across the North's network to deliver a real modern and effective system. That enhanced connectivity, coupled with an extra 35,000 seats every hour between key cities at peak times, enables the North to operate as a single economy, leading to a multi-billion-pound increase in the gross value added per year, creating thousands of better quality jobs in our cities and also driving that regeneration that's well needed in our towns. By better connecting the North's strongly performing economic areas, we can rebalance the economy and bring tangible benefits to Northerners that will make a real difference to their lives. The increase in productivity, up to 2% in better connected places, will go some way to closing that north-south economic divide. Northern Powerhouse Rail will be delivered in full and can play that really key role in the government's levelling up agenda, as well as contributing to the green economy and particularly the recovery post-COVID-19. At its core, NPR is an economic programme designed to unlock future prosperity, but also deliver benefits to people's quality of life and the environment. Northern Powerhouse Rail will take 64,000 car trips off the North Road network each day, as the government looks at building back greener and more encouraging active travel rail can play that pivotal role in the modal shift away from the car and towards a sustainable one. So only 1.2% of us in the north use the train. 98% of us every day use fossil fuel vehicles. This just cannot be right. Public transport has to lead the charge. And as I mentioned earlier, NPR is part of that solution. But it's important to say that other major rail programmes, such as HS2 Phase 2B and the Transpennine Route upgrade, are delivered in full too, if the North's rail network is to be truly transformed. It's promising to see that the National Infrastructure Commission's interim report on the Integrated Rail Plan will focus on real benefits. By firming up year in year spending on rail projects, the government's plan will help boost jobs and inject pace and confidence into a sustained economic recovery for the North. But this process shouldn't reopen the either-or choice between major rail projects or other rail upgrades. We will absolutely work tirelessly to make the case of a transformational investment, and our leaders expect to be part of that decision making. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tim. Again, some really important points there. I think touching on, the idea of the car being king in the north is something that affects, everybody's life. I'm as guilty as anyone when I'm travelling to Leeds for meetings from Manchester. I get in the car, I don't get the train, which is bad, I know. But I think it's influenced partly by, I think the train's going to be late, essentially. So I think we're going to go next to Anna Jane Hunter. Anna is the director for the North of England for North of England Rail, for Network Rail. So Anna.
Hi, thanks for having me, and yeah, really interesting topic. I won't take up quite so much time in introduction as the previous two speakers. I'm keen to get into the discussion, but at Network Rail, it's probably just important for me to say that whilst we're looking to the future, and as a northerner and somebody who lives in the north, I'm really excited about what NPR has to offer. We do acknowledge we've got a bit of work to do in the meantime, so picking up on what you just said there, David, a lot of the reason behind people not using rail as much as we would all like them to, because we don't always get it right. In particular, in the last few years, since May 18, it's not been the best of time for a lot of passengers, particularly in the north. So we're acutely aware of that. There's a lot going on in the meantime. It's not all just about jam tomorrow. So we are doing a lot of work to upgrade the network and to deliver a better service for passengers right from now, all the way up to preparing for NPR, delivering NPR, and working with TfN to deliver its strategic vision for the long term. So really exciting time to be in the north and in rail. Looking forward to some questions and getting into the discussion about it today.
Brilliant, thank you. And now we're going to go to Elizabeth de Jong, who is the Director of Policy at the Freight Transport Association. Really interested and important area, isn't it? I mean, these discussions are obviously a lot dominated by passengers and commutes and things. And freight is obviously of vital importance to the economy. So, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for inviting me. So we represent the logistics industry across all modes of transport and including rail, which plays a really important part in the logistics industry. So I'm here talking about rail freight, flying the flag for that, and the Northern Powerhouse Rail and how they fit together. So why is rail freight important? Well, it delivers both those economic and environmental benefits that the north of England needs. The rail freight industry is vital to the economic success of Great Britain, £1.7 billion of economic benefits per year, but to bring that to life, that's £30 billion worth of goods to customers around and across Britain each year. So rail freight, important for the north, it's important for economic efficiency. And David, compared to the road network, the rail network is over twice as reliable, with 4.4 seconds per mile delay on average compared to 9.4 on the highway. So you might be interested in this in particular. But another reason why it's very important is one freight train can remove up to 76 heavy good vehicles from the road, really reducing congestion, which again improves economic efficiency as well as delivering environmental benefits and safety benefits too. And we know through TfN's own work that there's a number of issues with rail freight in the north of England. And as such, these will hinder economic efficiency, economic growth and delivery of those environmental benefits. And we're hoping that Northern Powerhouse Rail can be a catalyst to address a number of those. So lack of capacity is the prime focus for rail freight, getting what's known as a freight path or a route on the rail network. 70% of rail freight operators' investments are directed towards capacity enhancements. It's really important for them. And TfN's projections are that rail freight by rail in the north is expected to grow by 40% up to 2050. Rail freight does also suffer from low average speeds. So in conversations around rail in the north, the instance that's often given is Drax Power Station near Selby, and that imports biomass wood pellets from a number of northern ports, Liverpool, Immingham and Hull. And the average time for a loaded train for a 100-mile journey has been over 7 hours, so an average speed of just 16 miles an hour. And additionally, the network does not allow the longest train lengths, which rail really needs to compete with road and deliver those benefits, particularly for intermodal containers, which our ports really need to link them into our economy. And we know there's not enough width and heights on rail routes to allow ISO containers on the rail network, and gauge clearance is needed if rail's to play its part in moving freight by sea shipping routes in and out of the northern England. And there's nothing of sufficient clearance across the Pennine at all. So those issues with rail freight in the north of England are important because they mean that road congestion is higher than it should be, and economic growth, particularly around the growth of ports in the north of England, is constrained. I have read that Northern Powerhouse Rail says that it's likely to release rail capacity onto the existing network that could be used for freight, which will lead to economic benefits. But we really need to see a commitment that that potential additional capacity for rail freight from the Northern Rail Powerhouse is delivered, particularly of the right length and paths, and linking our ports from the west, such as Liverpool, to the east, Humber and Tees and Tyne. It's so important for making the north attractive to international trade and investment, so that those shipping lines make greater use of northern ports. And we know that freight's been underestimated in government appraisal processes. It's often just valued at the driver's time. This is being looked at by DfT at the moment, and I'm hoping that holds the key to unlocking the delivery of more freight paths, which will boost the economy in the north of England.
Brilliant, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, again, brilliant points, and obviously, you know, hugely important for our working ports. I was thinking of Steve then when you were making some of the points about Liverpool, and just I know that the deal with the US is potentially big for Liverpool, isn't it? And you know, are those businesses in the US looking at how well freight works in the north when they're considering Liverpool docks, for example? So big issues there. We're finally going to go to Lucy Pryor. Lucy is the Business Engagement Director for 3 Squared Ltd, and I'm sure she's going to give us the business, the voice of business on the hugely important issue of NPR. Lucy.
Well, I'm going to speak as a business, but also as a passenger, and this is something I always go back to. We are all passengers. So, David, big ticking off for not travelling by rail, but if you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, it's got to be addressed. So, picking up on Steve's comments about climate, energy and Brexit, as well as west to east connectivity, for me, Northern Powerhouse Rail and inter-regional connectivity, it's crucial to supporting and surviving all of these things as well. So Elizabeth's perfect points on what modal shift means for cleaner air, not just on the decarb agenda, but air quality, that's inarguable. And Elizabeth, you're not the only one pushing for modal shift here as well. We work firmly with Fox, with freight operating companies, as well as with passenger operating companies. And it is so important that transport in its widest guise is supported by Northern Powerhouse Rail. So east-west connectivity, David, you mentioned about the American trade deals. We're getting some of our biomass that's going over to Drax in the east from North American plantations, it's vitally important, not just for domestic transit of people between our metro centres. It is vitally important for connecting our communities, but it is also vitally important for connecting our commodities and the use of those commodities as well. There are so many points all of the speakers have raised, and there's some really cool ones coming in on the chat. So just to pick up on one in particular, for me, Northern Powerhouse Rail as a business, it's vital for business, but it's vital for our enabled and connected communities. So everything from active travel to modal shift to last mile, for me, that's what NPR represents.
Thank you, Lucy. That's great. So I think we've spoken to everybody now, and we're going to do questions. So first question, it's come in actually on the chat, which I just want to kick it off because I just think it's a really important point when you're talking about Northern Powerhouse Rail. We know it's an east-west, it connects to big cities. What's it doing for everybody else? And just Rosie Cooper has made the point, I think she was talking when Steve was, messaging when Steve was talking, the North is more than big cities and Warrington. And I guess the point that she's making there is, you know, what's it going to do for the smaller places? What's it going to do for the towns? As you know, you have Liverpool that will quite clearly benefit from a new line. Will that help places like St Helens? You know, places that are along that route. Do you want to kick that off, Steve?
Yeah, I think there's the need for connectivity between the intercity infrastructure and the inner city stuff. So I think Rosie could be Rosie Cooper MP, you know, who's the Member of Parliament for West Lancashire. And if she is, she's possibly talking about linking into Skelmersdale. And the reason that West Lancashire could benefit from this is because if we get the city-to-city rail infrastructure right, then we're also looking at where we can extend and expand the intra-city stuff. So for ourselves, that would mean a new line from Kirby Station, if anyone knows it, great place, Kirby, that's where I'm from, to a new station, and then that gives us the possibility of going on to West Lancashire. That would mean that people from West Lancashire could get the train into the centre of Liverpool and then go anywhere, not just on a faster journey, but also because of the increases in the capacity, they could, you know, use that as well for transporting freight and goods. And the issue that you mentioned, David, about the potential bilateral trade deal between the UK and the US, it would be likely, wouldn't it, that you would use a western-facing port, and Liverpool's historic links with the likes of America, that would, for me, make more economic sense to come here. But if it did, the problems then are that freight would have to go on the road, and that's why government needs to take its blinkers off. Somebody said before about and Tim knows my point that I'm going to make. Somebody said before about the type of infrastructure that we need. Do you know what we need is not the best infrastructure that we can afford, because the South never gets offered that as a catch-22 question. We need whatever the best option will be for the North, because that's what the South has always had, and they've never had to compete or to choose between one option which is suboptimal or not getting anything at all. We need the same consideration in the North.
Thanks, Steve. I just going to flick to Tim. Tim, did you, just on the point Steve makes on the London and the South East seem to get their top option. What are the conversations that you're having with government? Do you think that Northern Powerhouse Rail, are we in a good position to get the best option, the top option, the new lines rather than the upgraded ones? Where are you seeing that at the moment?
So for us in Transport for the North, what we're looking at is the most transformational options. but there is a range of options on the table. And we're building up the economic evidence in terms of travel time against the original conditional outputs that were set by Leaders of the North in 2015. So trains per hour, journey times, putting all that economic evidence together as well into our strategic outline case. And that strategic outline case will then go forward, approved by our board, into government. But in the meantime, we'll be going in September with a phasing scenario, and in November with a preferred network to our leaders to actually coalesce around what a network for MPR would actually be. But we certainly will not be accepting a lowest option. I think, sorry, can I just come back on a couple of points? If we really track back, since 1960, we've lost half the railway in this country. We've lost 2/3 of the platforms just in Manchester. And where did the railway start? Well, they actually started here in the north of England between the two great cities of Liverpool and Manchester. That was the first journey between cities. And I think for us, we're trying to climb back up to get a railway system that has functionality in it that will be able to move passengers around in a seamless way. So everybody in the north will benefit from MPR, whether or not you're on one of our services or we're releasing capacity for either freight or more regional services. And that's what you're able to do by introducing new lines. In a twin track railway, that's all we have in the north. So we can't get around those freight trains and those regional services. And only by increasing the infrastructure will you be able to do that. So I live in Lancaster. It won't be an MPR service through Lancaster, but I'll travel down my hour to Manchester, jump on an MPR service, and I'll be in Leeds at least half an hour quicker than I would be. So it's a system. We need to make sure that we plug in that extra capacity and connectivity, and that's what MPR does.
Thanks, Tim. And Anna, just on those on some of those points that you know, because there's the obvious, you know, Steve will want the new line that goes through Warrington. I know the government are eyeing up. They were eyeing up at least a potential upgrade to an existing line. What are the benefits and the negatives of new line versus upgraded? I mean, the government will, I guess, try to argue cost benefits when, you know, they're saying we can get the same service but for less money. I guess what it comes down to. How important is it that MPR does have those brand new lines from places like Liverpool?
So I think there's a place for both, really. There's a place for upgrading and there's a place for new lines. And you know, it's not a case of one or the other always being right for a particular place or for a particular scheme. So all that needs to be worked through, and that's what Tim and his team are doing. And as he says, there's a number of options still on the table. I think there's a number of considerations in the geography that we've got in the north. You know, the north of England's beautiful and we've got the Pennines and all the rest of it, but they're blooming hard bits of land to build through, you know, and to build new lines through. And so that's got to be a realistic, you know, consideration, if nothing else, that if we want things quickly and we want to deliver the benefits quickly, we need to work through what the best option is to deliver that for passengers and freight users as quickly as possible, rather than, you know, as I said in my introduction, jam tomorrow. You know, if we keep always going for the gold-plated option, which I know my own organisation has been accused of doing in the past, then we take so long to get there that we're missing out on benefits in the meantime. So I would just say there's a place for both, and we need to find the right solution that's value for money, yes, because it's taxpayers' money, and you know, we need to consider that. But as Steve says, we don't want to be shortchanged. You know, we want the best option for our region too.
Sure. And again, you know, for you, Elizabeth, the best option, well, is building in that capacity for freight, isn't it? And this isn't just about passengers, and it's about capacity and making sure MPR as a network does have built in what business needs, isn't it? And that extra capacity that we've just talked about. You know, we're expecting that to increase going forward, and at the moment we don't have a system that's fit for purpose in some respects.
No, and I think there's some features of that that are quite important. Some of the things I mentioned in my introduction, but even just having one Transpennine route upgrade would make such a difference. So at least one across the Transpennine must be in the minimum case I'm hoping that Tim puts together as well, and the regular paths so that the trains can run at speed, and making sure it's properly cleared. The other question I have though, there's great benefits already from the capacity on the rail network and through rail freight. There's also some gaps in electrification, so we could be moving towards an even more economically or environmentally attractive future from electrification, some gaps in Midland Main Line, Manchester to Leeds and York. I'm imagining those are outside the types of options you're looking at, Tim, in your outline business cases, but I'd be very interested to see where you think that is heading to, or in fact.
I just think that the first comment I want to make is, and let's be really clear here, we expect Transpennine upgrade to be delivered in full. That is full electrification. That is also W10, W12 gauge cleared. We cannot have trains running all the way around the north, taking such a long time. So the average speed, as you quite rightly pointed out, is around 15, 16 mile an hour for a freight train. The average speed for a passenger train is circa 57 miles an hour. They are not good speeds. That's why we want to introduce the ability for these trains to move quicker through the north to get to their destinations. In MPR, what we're looking at, of course, is back to that release capacity. So allowing more freight to move through the north of England. It is a real powerhouse here. And we've seen through COVID-19 what the rail freight industry have been able to deliver. Upping of services, getting those goods around the north of England, making sure that we can still function as a north with our 17 million residents that work and live here. It is about capacity and connectivity. It is about making sure that the money starts to flow. So I've seen on the chat, MPR's decades away. Under my leadership, MPR is not decades away. We are expecting to start, as I've said, in financial year 24-25. We are already starting to push for surveys out on the existing infrastructure to start to develop our designs. We're also pushing for new stations to begin construction at Barnsley, Dearne Valley and Rotheram Midland Main Line. And it's not just pure railways. What we're looking at as well is a tram train system out from Sheffield over to Doncaster. So there's a lot of different types of infrastructure. NPR is a lot more complex than HS2. We have new line construction. We have existing lines, major junction interventions where we're going to have trains moving as we're constructing the railway line. But it's really important that we can show the government that we can start on time, we can hold our budget, and we can deliver this for our leaders of the north, for the people of the north, because this is where it all began. So it's coming home to the north now, and this is where we need to stand up and be really strong in getting our strategic outline business case through.
And I guess that's one of the big complaints, isn't it, of people? They look at MPR and they think, well, it's not gonna happen for years and years and years. And Lucy, is that what you see in sort of in business? Is that what people concerned that it's not going to have any impact on them for a long time? It needs to be sped up.
I think as a business, as a small business, you've got to look at this in two ways. So one for me, obviously working in railway, being a software provider into railway, it's a massive business development opportunity. But as a responsible employer, it's a massive corporate social responsibility opportunity. We work really, really hard to employ really good quality local staff, but we've got to widen that net because Sheffield as a city region, and in competition, let's say, with Leeds and Manchester, for example, we are struggling to find, or collectively, digital companies are struggling to recruit. Now, COVID has proved that we can work from home even better than we ever imagined. So we will have a change in the way and the why people travel for work. But having said that, we keep talking about connectivity, we keep talking about communities, and in the chat, people keep talking about, is this just about train lines? No, it's not. It's about helping people move. TfN is road and rail with airport connection. It's all modes. Rail freight is part of the overarching modal conversation. So for me as a business, obviously I want the business opportunity of selling to the big tier ones, but as a local employer and as an active business member of a community, I want Northern Powerhouse Rail to enable people to travel for work. It's an old statistic I use, but I refer back to a Community Transport Association conference I went to a few years ago. They've proved that if a person can access affordable bus transport, they're going to be more likely to head to get out of NEET, not in employment, education or training. They've got a bus connection, they're more likely to be able to get to job interviews and job opportunities in their home, village, town or city. If they can do then that's their first step on that career ladder. So that is enabling communities through the power of transport. I think that's part of the conversation we don't focus on enough. This is about helping people, whether it's through cleaner air because of better rail freight, or whether it's about moving people better to be able to access the job market on whatever mode. That's what we need to look at.
I think that's a really, really crucial point, isn't it? And it's part of the argument for HS2 when I hear, people talking about it being a commuter line to London. Actually, it's if I live in Manchester, I could suddenly start doing a job in Leeds, realistically, or Sheffield or wherever. I don't have to move to London for those jobs. Do you see that a lot, Steve? I was on huge student population in Liverpool. Do you see a lot of them graduate and then they go down to London or the southeast? And do you think that NPR, it'll open up opportunities, so suddenly they'll stay in Liverpool after they graduate and they could work in Manchester, they could work in wherever? There's just so many more options for them.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue around student and graduate retention for us, because I don't want a brain drain from us. We've got brilliant universities, as you know, and we don't retain enough of the best minds for the Liverpool City region. But as long as they are people who are getting good jobs in any part of the country, then I suppose one of the factors would be the speed of transport and how they can get from A to B. But there's lots of other things, the cost of housing, of course, and the fact that if you wanted to, you could live in Liverpool, you could go and work in Manchester, and you could come back to somewhere with culture if you wanted to. But there's all sorts of and trophies. There's all sorts of things that you can do, but there are other factors in that. And what I would say is, you keep on mentioning about the integrated transport system, because we've now spoken about NPR, but we've spoken about intracity services as well. But all of this has to be part of a London-style transport system that areas need to look towards. Both myself in the Liverpool City region and Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester are looking at that London-style integrated transport system, because they've got trams there, and that includes trams and buses as well as trains. Ours, we've got a ferry or ferries and buses as well, which were part of ours. And that's the only way you're really going to make this all fit together. It's a network. And if you look at an individual part of it, it doesn't seem to stack up. That's why our business case is predicated on what it does to transform the whole system and therefore the economy.
Yeah, I think, on that integrated part of the discussion, it's probably one for Tim and Anna, but there's a lot of talk at the moment about the National Infrastructure Commission is looking at the ways in which HS2 is going to work combined with NPR. Tim, are you seeing kind of what behind the scenes discussions are you seeing there, and also do you feel like we're in a good place in terms of HS2 East, for example, connecting properly with NPR? Is there work to be done?
Kilometres of HS2 2B infrastructure, probably worth circa around £13.5 billion. That piece needs to be built to be able to allow the system, as I talked about, to work. We have made our representations through to the National Infrastructure Commission for the call for evidence for the 29th of May. And there'll be various iterations of that as we go on to the end of the year, where the Department for Transport will actually be producing the independent rail plan, which I think is really important because it starts the conversation as to how do you integrate 2B, NPR, and potentially parts of the Trans-Pennine upgrade. Because what we want to make sure is that we keep the North moving while we're building a really long-term plan here. So we want that 20-year pipeline. And there's a couple of things that haven't come into the conversation yet, but we need people to be able to build these. So we know that 50% of the rail force at the moment within the country will actually have left within 15 years. So there's all that opportunity for people, real jobs, real training, and then leaving a legacy to go worldwide with opportunities for people that have actually worked with us to help design and construct this. I'm not looking for people on shovels. What I'm looking for is software designers, people that are able to help with innovations to actually get this moving in a real positive way that gives that value for money piece. So there's a lot of legacy work there that will come out of this. But that steady pipeline of electrification, of opening up the capacity with the rail, will really start to drive our economy and build into that levelling up of the north of England.
Thanks, Tim. And Anna, just picking up on some of Tim's points, but I was going to throw in one of my own, just because there's, again, you know, there's been various reports on HS2, the eastern leg, and, you know, potential cuts and all sorts of things that could happen over there. And if that was cut and it did go through Manchester rather than having its own line up through the Midlands, what would the impact be on NPR and you know, yeah, where are we with that really?
So, well, very, very simply, this is a message that Tim and I together have been promoting on several panels like this for what feels like the best part of the 2 years that I've been in this job, which is we need both. We need HS2 and we need NPR. It's not either or. TFN is very much on board with that message, and we need to be really clear on that it isn't a choice between the two. We do need both. Just picking up on something from in the chat panel, just want to give a shout out to the Northeast. I'm from a very small town north of Newcastle, and I really relate to what people are saying about a couple of things. About it's not all about Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool. I live in Liverpool now, and I'm one of the people who have gone south for work, because where I'm from, there wasn't, you know, the job opportunities that I wish there was for people from communities like mine. And most of us, frankly, did go off to university and not come back. And that's a picture that's really common across many little towns in the north of England. So we do need to think about how we make the north and make the world smaller. You know, the world is actually a really small place now, but for some people it still feels really big. You know, York still feels a really long way from where I'm from in the northeast, and we need to just shrink everything so that people can expand their employment opportunities in the way that Lucy described, so that they don't have to move away to university if they don't want to. They can travel. You know, just giving people those options in life is what this is all about. And it isn't just all about Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds. It's about Cumbria. It's about the northeast. It's about Hull and all the bits out on the extreme to the east. It's about the whole of the north becoming better connected, reducing those journey times, improving the freight links. You know, it's about the whole picture. And just because, you know, we mentioned the big cities a lot doesn't mean that we're not focusing on the whole of the north. And I'm pleased to say my work with TFN definitely reflects that the whole of the north is at the table. The whole of the north is represented in these discussions. And I'm certainly really pleased about things like the Ashton Blythe and Tyne line reopening. You know, that's a really great example of where that will connect communities by rail that have been cut off since my granddad worked on that rail line, you know, when I was a baby. That's fantastic, and that's not Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds. That's just one example of other communities being benefited from the work we're doing.
Sure, thanks.
I'll get off my soapbox now, shall I?
You beat me to it though, Anna.
There's a lot of, I mean, the lifestyle things are put, and there's a lot of questions coming into the chat about, you know, things like cycling points at these proposed train stations for MPI. Is that being taken into account? You know, trams, where are we with all the intercity trams that we've been promised so many times? You know, again, to use the example of Leeds, you know, it doesn't have a tram system. How important is that, Lucy, do you think, the lifestyle, you know, building in the you know, green environmental considerations, you know, walking, cycling?
Massive. Yeah, absolutely massive. If you look at, gosh, there are numerous stations across the north. I'll use my local one. So I'm in Sheffield, so again, not Manchester, Leeds or Liverpool. We've got an amazing cycle hub at Sheffield Station. You can take bikes on trains, but on trams, sorry, but not too many. But we've got really good cycle lanes across Sheffield city centre. That whole active travel and that whole mobility piece is really important. But that's looking at it perhaps through a commuter and a local leisure lens. If we look at the fact that the north of England is a massive, massive tourist destination as well, enabling active travel through a well-connected transport system should support that as well. So, you know, whether you're getting people on the Settle Carlisle Railway for that type of tourism, or if you're actually getting people into city centre breaks, getting people in and out of city centres isn't just about commuting. Getting people travelling around the north has a massive economic benefit as a responsible employer, but also to support tourism and leisure.
Thanks, Lucy. I was just going to go back to Steve and ask a simple point that, you know, you think that a new line, it's going to give you £15 billion extra GVA per year, I think it was, and 24,000 extra jobs, 6.3 million visitors extra a year. That's what a new line will give you, MPR line, connecting Liverpool and Warrington. So obviously it's massive for the Liverpool City region. What is your biggest fear in terms of what could happen? And what is your biggest fear about this new COVID world that we're in? You know, are we in a position where the government is looking at cutting corners? What are your views on that?
The biggest fear on the first part is that the government will go for a suboptimal option, and that's unacceptable. I've already told TFN, I've told Grant Shapps face to face. They say there's going to be an announcement tomorrow, and I'll continue to tell him that we won't accept it. We won't accept Fiddler's Ferry because it doesn't give us what the whole idea of this scheme is, which is to be transformational. So that's the first part. The government, I think, haven't fully appreciated how strategically important the Liverpool City region, I'm just talking from my perspective as Metro Mayor now, the Liverpool City region will be to UK PLC with that potential link to North America. We've got a post-Panamax facility there. It's, you know, it'll take the biggest ships in the world. So there's a lot of things, but it needs to think of it holistically, and that's part of the problem, which leads on to the second bit. And I fear in a post-COVID world that what the government will do is look at the trends for passenger numbers, etc., in this period and think that potentially public transport might be on the decline because of, we know, for instance, on our, the ones that we run, Merseyrail Electrics and our bus network, we're probably on about 20% of capacity at the moment, passenger capacity at the moment. And that doesn't make for a very good business case. But of course, this is a snapshot in time. If you have a look at the trend year on year is for increases in passenger numbers, and that's what we want the government to really concentrate on, and not do what I fear they might do, which is do the cheapskate option and then blame COVID.
Elizabeth, is that your kind of concern, just when you're having conversations with government, that, you know, business and freight, I guess you don't have quite the same problems, do you? Has it been kind of not business as usual, but during COVID, have you seen capacity requirements stay the same? And, you know, that is an important case, isn't it? That if it has gone down, that government don't think, well, we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, so generally our engagement with the Department for Transport has been exceptional throughout COVID. So key worker, important sector, the focus has never been greater, and there's still continued financial monitoring of the whole of the logistics sector. There's a number of subsectors where they're particularly anxious about at the moment, and one of those is construction. So I'm hoping that the announcement and the importance of infrastructure schemes is really seen at the moment. It's absolutely critical for the productivity of our economy, and also linking it to recovery in terms of trade deals. I was thinking whilst you were speaking, somewhere in our logistics report, we look at the World Bank stats on the competitiveness of Britain, and we are declining in terms of our competitiveness. And one of the reasons for that is because our infrastructure just isn't reliable or efficient enough. So I'm hoping that the case for investment in transport infrastructure is one of the easiest or easier cases for investment to make at the moment. But still, that doesn't make it happen. And there's two areas where I think we can make better cases. One is if we had a commitment to, for example, electrification or that building programme for 30 years, then we can build the skills and actually get cheaper at delivering them. Because I know, Anna Jane, there were issues with how much electrification was costing elsewhere in the UK, and that was one of the reasons for it. And the other area is really needing some more work done on how freight is valued in our appraisal methods that we use in this country. I was very much involved in that work pre-COVID, but we in government been looking and had other priorities. I'm hoping that's starting again, Tim may know.
And do you think, Elizabeth, do you think that the government are taking into account things like potential, you know, post-Brexit, you know, what Steve talks about with the US, Liverpool could boom, or, you know, other ports could benefit. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with the Far East.
We know that there's two things that at least two things that the government has to deliver. It has to deliver a stonking Brexit that can boost trade for Britain. That's where they've got political jeopardy. And the other is their absolute commitment to levelling it up. So keep making the case, everyone on this call and everyone listening.
We've had a question in, well, there's a few people that have made the point. HS2 and NPR timescales need accelerating, needed now, not just in 20 years. Existing Trans-Pennine routes should be upgraded and electrified as much as possible. Tim, I was going to ask, as somebody who's kind of involved, and Anna, in the actual delivery of these, of the service itself, when NPR is actually physically being built, Tim, are you going to see lines being built first? You know, Liverpool gets its line first, and they look at the, you know, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds line later, or are you going to see everything happening at once? How is that going to be decided?
So what we're going to do is we're going to put a set of phasing scenarios to our members, our board, and that will have a list of options as to where we start first. And I think a lot's going to be around the consenting. So we'll need a hybrid bill for the new lines, Liverpool, Manchester, and Manchester via Central Bradford up towards Leeds. In the meantime, while that consenting work is going on, we can actually have that spade in the ground in 24, 25, out Leeds over to Hull, which completes that Trans-Pennine route, fully electrified right the way through, and then opening up the Leeds to Newcastle and of course Sheffield across to Manchester through the Hope Valley. But one thing I can say is we'll be working on every corridor, whether it's getting consents, design, delivery, or operational, for the next 20 years. There will be not one corridor that we won't be working on. And I think that's really important, because we want to make sure that the North is absolutely baked in to all the work we're doing. The other thing, of course, we need to make sure is that while we're doing that work, particularly on the existing lines with major junction interventions, that we have diversion routes, because we have to think about all the passengers that we will be affecting for a very long time. But what you will get out of that is a world-class railway that the North deserves. And when we talk about passenger growth over the last 20 years, it's increased by 194%. Yes, we have COVID now, which is an absolute awful pandemic that we're going through, but we expect those numbers to get back to pre-COVID time and then to carry on increasing at the same level. But we have to make sure that a public service offering really resonates with our residents in the North. They want to get on these buses, they want to get on the trains, they want to use electric vehicles, and they're thinking about that modal shift, getting out of your car onto an electric train. So we'll be all electric on NPR. The people that will be constructing it will be arriving in electric vehicles. The equipment we'll be using to build the railway will be electric. That is really important, because we want to be the greenest railway as well.
And I guess that's one point that everybody watching this now is going to be really concerned about, Anna, that, you know, we're talking long-term changes to our railway network. At the moment, it's not working particularly well. It hasn't been for probably for as long as I've lived the last couple of years in Manchester again, and with the timetable change. So, you know, how much of an impact do you think this long-term work will have on commuters, and where do you see the crunch points?
I think what's really important is just within TfN, and the fact that we're working so closely with people like Network Rail, Highways England, we'll be able to work through the diversion routes, work through far more closely how we'll keep the passengers moving right the way through the network as we construct this railway. And I'm sure Anna would like to jump in just to talk about major construction jobs that have actually just been delivered recently. For instance, Liverpool Lime Street, really successful around there, because a lot of thought has gone into this Trans-Pennine upgrade, using the Calder Valley, losing the route coming down from Leeds to Sheffield and back across to Manchester. Is all really important. Takes time to work through, because you've got to make sure that you can move electric trains through there. Otherwise, you'll struggle with the rolling stock. Hannah.
Yeah, so Lime Street is a really good example. You know, we hear a lot about the negative stories, because journalists like your good self find them more interesting to write about and to put on the television. So we hear a lot about, you know, trains that aren't performing well, and the projects that don't go well. But actually, every day and every year we deliver a lot of good service for people, and we deliver a lot of projects that are actually really successful and great examples of industry collaboration, which Liverpool Lime Street is absolutely up there as an example of a truly collaborative project that involved everybody from the city region, who felt rightly passionately about keeping Liverpool open for business, and we had to work with them to pick the right time to affect the city, and how could we keep people travelling to that really important visitor economy. You know, we had all of the operators involved trying to keep services running and do shuttle services to heighten to get things in and out. Really complicated project, but it was a massive success because we all work together. So we can do it, and you know, that is the kind of groundwork that's already starting with NPR already, even ahead of Tim's ambitious timescales of 2024, spades in the ground. So we know we can do it. We know there's a lot we can improve on. So Elizabeth mentioned electrification, which I think it's probably fair to say our non-delivery on electrification projects or unsuccessful delivery on previous projects spooked the government for a while, so they went off it. You know, that really became not flavour of the month, but I'm pleased it is now back on the agenda, and it does feed into a lot of the sustainability agendas that we need to be hammering home, and we can do it. We've learned a lot. Andrew McNaughton did a wonderful piece of work on how we can deliver electrification cheaper, while still obviously doing so safely and all the rest of it. So there's been a lot of work put into how we can do that going forward, and we should, you know, seek to do that. Just picking up on the question you asked, Steve, about, you know, COVID and linking to that, it's going to be disruptive. Building all these things, there's no getting away from it, is going to be disruptive for rail users. We've got to be grown up about that and just say, you know, it is going to be disruptive. But the one thing that COVID might help us with in that sense is that numbers have gone down for a period of time. We don't know how long. None of us has a crystal ball and knows how quickly it's going to ping back. But that could be, you know, to our favour in terms of, if numbers are a little bit lower for a while, what can we get done? You know, and how can we progress things more quickly? We've been set the challenge from DFT, Project Speed, to see what we can do quickly in terms of project delivery. And I think we've got to strike while the iron's hot there. It will come back. Numbers will come back. I'm sure it will. And it's been heartbreaking for those of us who love our industry, telling people not to travel for months. You know, it goes against everything we believe in and everything we want from the railway. But we are now starting to welcome people back to rail. It'll happen over time. And in the meantime, we've got to crack on and try and deliver some improvements for them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna. And I think we're drawing to a conclusion now, but some really good discussion, and interesting, Anna, to hear about the benefits of this COVID world in terms of NPR delivery, as well as the minuses. And I guess from what everybody's in agreement that NPR has huge benefits that outweigh any of the kind of short-term negatives, and it's something that we need to keep you know, push the government on and make sure that they deliver on their promises to the North. So thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope that you enjoyed watching from home as well. If you want to carry on the discussion, there is a Twitter hashtag which I don't have to hand, but I think it's called TFN Talks, hashtag TFN Talks. And thank you for joining.